Dear viewers, welcome to my channel KK's Study Aid. I am Kazi Kamal with you with economic term from microeconomics, and my today's term is consumer surplus. What is called consumer surplus? Now let's see what is called consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is nothing but the difference between the demand price and the market price. Very simply, we can say that this is the difference between the demand price and the market price. When the consumer surplus will occur, when the demand price is greater than the market price, there will occur the consumer surplus. Or in another words, we can say that when the consumer pay less than they are willing to pay, there will occur consumer surplus. So it is very to understand the term consumer surplus. There is nothing to be difficult here in this term consumer surplus. Now let's see an example. Demand price is to be $10 per kg. Market price, say it is to be $8 per kg. So here we obviously see that the demand price is higher than the market price. Obviously it will occur consumer surplus here, but how much consumer surplus the consumer will enjoy here in this case when he purchase a kg of this considering commodity? We can say that the consumer surplus will be here $2 per $2 is the consumer surplus here. When does consumer surplus will rise? Obviously, when market price falls, consumer surplus will rise. And on the other hand, when market price rises, consumer surplus falls. So here we say that when consumer surplus occurs, very simply we can say that when the demand price is higher than the market price. What is market price? Market price is the price at which goods or services are to be sold in the market. This is called market price. And what is called demand price? Demand price is the willing price of the consumers, which the consumers are willing to pay to purchase a certain commodity under a demand curve. So it is very much clear that when there is a difference between demand price and the market price, there will be a consumer surplus. Now let's see the matter in a graphical presentations. I think that these graphical presentations will make you better understand what is consumer surplus. Now let's see the matter in a graphical presentations. Now come to the point. This is horizontal line, this is vertical lines, this is horizontal lines, this is the point of origin, we call it to be 0. Generally price is measured here on the vertical curve and the quantity measured on the horizontal curves. We can find a demand curve like this. This will be called DD, and there will be a supply curve which will go upward. It slopes upward. We can call it SS, and there is an intersection point. This is the point is called to be the intersection point, the intersection between the demand curve and the supply curve, which is called to be the equilibrium point, which denotes the equilibrium quantity Q and the equilibrium price P. So we can call this equilibrium price P is to be the market price here, because this is the price at which goods or services are actually sold in the market. But there is some prices, there will be so many prices here upper than this market price under this demand curve. This could be P1, P2 and P3. There will be so many points here on these vertical lines, but above the price lines there are so many points here, and each and every points can be described as the demand price under the demand curve dt. So here we see that there are a lot of prices above will remain under the price lines. There are a lot of prices which will be higher than the market prices. So obviously there will occur a consumer surplus. So what do we say when the consumer of the commodity purchases the level of quantity Q at the market price P? What will be his consumer surplus when he is under this demand curve and his supply curve is SS? Obviously, under our answer is that he will enjoy the triangular area D P E as consumer surplus. Obviously, he will enjoy this triangular area as consumer surplus. So we can say that the area under the demand curve but above the price lines is described as the consumer surplus. Very simple, very easy to understand, my friends. There is nothing to be difficult here to understand what is consumer surplus. So when does consumer surplus occurs? Consumer surplus occur when people pay less than they are willing to pay. In fact, they were willing to price P3, P2, P1 and so many prices above this market price. But actually, they purchased the goods at the price, at the market price, and the price was P. In that case, there will occur a consumer surplus, and this consumer surplus will be described with a triangular area like DPE. So DPE is a triangular area which is considered here is to be the consumer surplus. So very shortly and very short way we'll keep in our mind what is consumer surplus is that the consumer surplus is the area under the curve. Area under the curve? No. Area under the demand curve, but above the price lines will be considered as the consumer surplus. Area under the demand curve, but above the price lines will be considered as the consumer surplus. We just put it in our mind that this is consumer surplus in a way that there is a difference between the demand price and a market price. If there is any difference between the market price and the demand price, but the demand price will be higher than the market price, in that case there will occur the consumer surplus. When does the consumer surplus is good for the consumer? When consumer surplus is greater, it will be considered as good for the consumers. But when the consumer surplus is smaller, it will not good for the consumers, because when the consumer surplus is small, they will get lesser satisfactions from purchasing of the relating commodities. But whereas the consumer surplus will be greater, they will enjoy a greater satisfaction from the purchasing of the commodities. So every consumer should know the level of consumer surplus, because if they knows the consumer surplus, they will be able to understand how much level of satisfaction they are staying at when they are purchasing the goods at the market price. So it is also important for the manufacturer or the supplier or the farm owners to know the consumer surplus, because once they know the consumer surplus, they will able to fix up their producing products in a very efficient way. So they should know the consumer surplus in order to fix their price in a very efficient way, in a sense that they will fix up their price at a level where they will be able to attain more customers, they will attain more demand for their goods, and consequently they'll be able to have a good branding for their products if they know the level of consumer surplus. The more the consumer surplus, the more there will be economic benefit for the consumers. In a perfect competitive market, there will be a greater consumer surplus, but whereas in the monopolistic market or a market of monopoly, there will be less consumer surplus. There are a lot of things to be discussed under the issue of consumer surplus, but in short, what we keep in our mind about consumer surplus, just give me the opportunity to review of this class here. First, we'll put in our mind that when the price of a commodity, when the market price of a commodity is less than its demand price, or in another words we can say that when the demand price is greater than market price, there will occur a consumer surplus. And in graphically we will say the area under the demand curve but above the price level will be considered as the consumer surplus. So my dear friends, I think that you have got a very good idea about consumer surplus, what is called consumer surplus. And there is another thing to discuss here. The matter is that when does the consumer surplus increases? Basically, it will increase when the market price will decrease, and it will decrease when the market price will increase. So when the higher the market price, the lower the consumer surplus, and the lesser the market price, the higher the consumer surplus. So these are the things about consumer surplus. So thank you very much. Thank you all for viewing my videos. Hope for the best. Take care, and I hope that I'll see you on my next videos with another topic. Thank you very much. Thank you all, and don't forget to subscribe my channel. Thank you very much.